Good night, everyone. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe, and I'm here live to answer your U.S. immigration-related questions as scheduled. So go ahead and start putting your questions in the comments so that I may answer those immigration-related questions. So while you join me and as you put your questions in, I want to formally introduce myself. I'm U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I help clients to get their permanent residence and status in the United States and also a work permit. Now, I also come on here every night at 9 p.m. just to answer your questions. So if you have an immigration related question, don't hesitate to put those questions in the comments. I don't limit the number of questions you ask. I don't limit the types of immigration questions that you ask because that's exactly what I'm here to do. My priority are your questions. So feel comfy to put those questions in the comments, and keep in mind that when you're in this space, there's no such thing as a dumb question, because if you're asking this question, I'm pretty sure there are many others who are listening to this live that also want to know the same question. So don't be hesitant, feel very comfortable to go ahead and put your questions in the comments. Now, I am going to be here until 9:30, so go ahead and start putting those questions in. But the conversation here doesn't have to end here. I am going to be hopping over at 9:30 to Instagram, and all you have to do is hop on over there with me and continue the conversation. If I don't get to your question by 9:30, you could just hop on over to Instagram. You can click on the link in my bio where you will see the Instagram button. You can click on that, follow me, and as soon as I hop on over to Instagram, you can continue talking and put your questions there as well. Now, I am coming with a very exciting topic tonight, many topics as a matter of fact. I want to give you a broad overview of how to apply for permanent residence in the United States if you are here and you don't have status. But in addition to that, I'm also going to be giving you other alternatives that you may not know about. So Miss Ocean, that is exactly the topic tonight, is after you overstay, what are the ways that you can still go on to get residency even with an overstay? So I'm going to go over that as well as some alternatives. So alternatives that may be happening to you and you didn't realize that you could qualify for a path to permanent resident. So the first is when you overstay. So usually what happens is when you come to the United States, as long as you can maintain your legal status in the United States and you qualify through an employer or through a qualifying relative to get your permanent residence, you can do what's called adjustment of status. Adjustment of status is the process of applying for permanent residence in the United States. However, keep in mind there are exceptions to that rule. Some individuals don't necessarily have to have current legal status to be able to get permanent residence, and that means that as long as they entered the country with some sort of permission or inspection, such as, if they came in with a visa, if they came in, or they came in and they were, So they came in with a visa, they were inspected in somewhere, given parole, given some sort of permission, then you could qualify. Now, if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that is one way that even though you overstayed your visa, you may still be able to apply for permanent residence as long as there are no other disqualifying issues in your background. So I'm going to go through who is an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, but I see here that Sweet Sash has a question. If I don't have enough to file all my paperwork, if I file I-130 first, then 2 months after I do the I-485. So I cannot tell you personally how to approach this situation. The reason being is I am not your attorney. However, what I'm going to tell you is generally, it is if you have the receipt notice and if you qualify for adjustment of status and you get the I-130, generally there is a way to apply for the petition first, and yes, afterwards use the receipt notice to show that you've applied for the I-130 and then apply for the I-485. Now, how you go about that, you want to make sure you do everything still correctly, that there is a cover letter explaining that you are now joining the I-485 with a pending I-130. So that is permissible. However, I don't know in your circumstance if it's permissible. So sweet Sash, that's where it's very important to get a legal consultation. Now, I want you to note here that I'm answering questions, but it's not personal legal advice. It's going to be general information because I don't know what your circumstances are. And in order to get personal legal advice, I usually have to evaluate your situation in detail. However, know that yes, it is a possibility to do that. Favored by God 31, thanks for sharing the live. What if we want to marry in his country and I want to move there? What is needed? So Harika Bella, if you're a United States citizen and you want to get married, now I don't know if you're a permanent resident or you're a US citizen, but it really depends on the laws of that country. And it would depend on an immigration attorney or an attorney who can advise you accordingly in that country. US citizens, though, what I can tell you is generally US citizens are not restricted from leaving and living somewhere else permanently. US citizens do this all the time. They go to other countries and live in other countries. But you have to check, in Morocco, you have to check with them to see what does a US citizen have to do in order to live there. So in essence, if you're thinking about living in Morocco, you would see what kind of application or permission or visa you need to get from them to be able to live long term in their country. So keep those questions coming. I am here to answer your US immigration related questions. So keep putting those questions in the comments while I'm here. So I'm here until 9:30. So you can go ahead and put your questions in the comments and I will go ahead and answer your questions. Now, what I'm talking about now is I'm talking about applying for permanent residence in the United States with a visa overstay. So if you've overstayed, how can you apply in the United States? And I'm also going to talk about alternatives if you can't apply for adjustment of status. Now, the first is I was talking about those who came into the country who were inspected, meaning you came in with a visa, you were given some sort of permission, as in you were paroled. Those who come in and they qualify as an immediate relative of a US citizen can possibly still adjust status in the United States, and that means to apply for permanent residence without leaving the country, permanent residence and a work permit. Now, immediate relatives of US citizens are going to be the spouse of a US citizen, the parent of a US citizen, and that US citizen is 21 and up, or a son or daughter of a US citizen who is under 21 and unmarried. So basically, you can obtain residency without marriage or having a US relative. So Miss Ocean, to you, there is one particular way. So if you're in the country and you're without status, and you have a US citizen, so if you don't have any relatives, because one way is if you're applying for a waiver. Thanks so much, Harika Bella. So if you're applying for a waiver and that waiver, in order to qualify for that waiver, you're going to have a US citizen or legal permanent resident, spouse or parent. So these are the ways that you definitely have to either have some sort of US spouse or relative to even fix your status if you overstay. But if you are in another type of situation, so if you're in a situation where you have been the victim of a crime, you are afraid to return to your country because you're being threatened, or you're afraid of persecution in your country, or you've been the victim of labor trafficking or even sex trafficking, then there are still paths for you to do it, even if you're not married to a U.S. person. So those are some other alternatives. Can you cancel a fiancé visa and change it to a marriage visa, or will immigration deny? So unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to change the fiancé visa into another type of visa. However, because remember with the fiancé visa, you're usually not married. There is one called a K3. At that point, you are married, but you're trying to get your spouse to the United States and then finish the process here. But with the fiancé visa, it's usually a U.S. citizen applying for their fiancé to come on a temporary visa. And so in this case, you will not be able to switch it over, transfer a fiancé to a marriage. But what you can do is apply now for the marriage base and let them know. Cancel the fiancé visa, let them know that you are now married, and so you no longer qualify for the K1, which is usually the fiancé visa. Now, this is where, Geo Girl, it's very important to get personal legal advice, because the way you address it is really going to be dependent on what your particular situation is. What are your needs? What are the plans of your spouse and yourself, or your fiancé and yourself? Now, you can always go to the link in my bio. It'll take you to the website where you can call and schedule a consultation. The phone lines are open 24/7. So on after hours, which would be now, they'll take your name, your information, and then tomorrow, on the next business day, a scheduling coordinator will get back to you. How long after a parole in place to receive residency? So the parole in place itself does not grant you residency. However, with parole in place, you can then apply for adjustment of status. And so it really depends on, it's not necessarily how long after parole in place that you'll receive residency. It's how long after you actually apply for permanent residency will you get it. If you're doing it based on family, so an immediate relative to a U.S. citizen, you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, which in parole in place, there is a type of parole in place for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens who are also military members. That is taking, once you get parole in place, it's taking 18 months from the time that you apply up until the time that you get your permanent residency. Keep in mind though that the time I'm giving, these are estimates based on my experience and my observations, but it is not set in stone, and it really depends on the service center and what they're currently dealing with the caseload. Married to U.S. citizen, filed I-485 and now waiting on biometrics, but spouse is abusive. So Latoya Henry, give me a call, because you are straight up saying your spouse is abusive. And if your spouse is abusive and you don't feel comfortable going through the process with your spouse, you can do it on your own. And you can stay married to that spouse. Be real, you're welcome. You can stay married to that spouse. I know this is a complex issue with a lot of different moving parts, and it's not necessarily up to me to tell you exactly what to do. But in the meantime, you don't have to put a hold on your status based on the spouse and whether they're having a good day or a bad day. You can actually go ahead and change the process to file on your own. Now, I can't stress enough, now when you file, you can still file the I-485 because your spouse is a U.S. citizen, so you would file the I-485 and for the work permit. And so usually the work permits are taking 6 to 8 months right now to come. And this is extremely confidential, so if you don't want your spouse to know, they will never have to know. For example, with me, I collect, when my clients are in a situation like this, I'm the one that collect their mail, and so I organize and coordinate with them separately to exchange mail with them in a way that their relative who's in the same household with them don't have to see that they're applying. You can give me a call, Latoya, because this is an area I focus on. So give me a call and schedule a consult and let's talk about this. any legal ways to get M1 visa to green card? Not directly. So remember that the M1 is a non-immigrant, and so it's definitely not a dual type of intent where you can come and switch from the M1 visa to the permanent resident. However, if you qualify through a relative, through an employer, it may very well be a way that you could adjust status in the United States, but you have to also make sure that you can maintain your status at the same time, unless you're the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, where you could possibly stay here and still fall out of status and go on to get the permanent residence. So could I travel through Airway domestically in states if I've overstayed in my visa? So right now, that is definitely permissible. However, keep in mind that they are now requiring, it depends. So if you're without status, you overstayed, and you don't have a valid form of ID, then it's going to get harder when that Real ID Act becomes effective, because every license now, every form of photo identification will now have a type of symbol on it that shows that it's Real ID Act compliant. However, before then, I believe it's October, but I would have to check on that. I'm not absolutely sure. But in October, things might change in regards to traveling, especially when you're without your papers. What you should do is check the airline and make sure you have all the identification that they require. But right now, traveling domestically is not necessarily a worry when you overstayed. Now, that's not to say there's absolutely no risk, but the risk is very small that they would be detaining you at the airport. It's usually when you leave the country that you're going to have a big problem. So Sonam Sharpa, what are the consequences of overstaying? So the consequence is that you might get a notice to appear and go into removal proceedings. You might be detained by ICE. That is always a possibility after you've overstayed. Who would we contact in Morocco to find out this information? So unfortunately, Harika, I am not an attorney in Morocco, and I don't usually deal with residency in Morocco. So you will have to definitely go through your fiance or your spouse and see if they can find the agency that deals with that issue. What can, so I know green card holder who flee to home country 8 months ago because of abusive spouse. What can she do to get back to the US? So there is what is called, Harika, you're welcome. So this may be a VAWA issue as well. And in a case like that, even though she's outside of the United States now, if she lived with the spouse and they were abusive, there is still a way to apply through consular processing. That means to apply from the outside of the US to come back into the US, because that immigrant spouse did live with a green card holder with the abuse going on in the United States. Now, what they need to do is schedule a consultation so I can evaluate the circumstances and determine how they can go about, whether they qualify for this, but they might very well have options here. What is the easiest way to get the work permit and permanent residence? So believe it or not, the most common way, I wouldn't necessarily say the easiest way, because the immigration system is so complex, so many different moving parts, that there's really no easy way. But there is, the fastest way is through family, and it's being the immediate relative of a US citizen. That means that you're the spouse of a US citizen, the parent of a US citizen who is 21 and up, or the son or daughter of a US citizen who's under 21 and unmarried. Then there are other categories, they take longer. And so I think that's the hardest part of the immigration process, is that most of the processes, most of the journey to the permanent residence is a waiting game. And so if you are the son or daughter of a US citizen and you're 21 and over, that's 6 to 7 years. If you are the son or daughter of a U.S. citizen, of a green card holder, you're unmarried and you're 21 and over, that's 5 to 6 years. However, what I will say right now, if you're the spouse of a permanent resident or you're the child of a permanent resident, meaning you're under 21 and unmarried, it's going faster because there's no wait list for an immigrant visa number. That can change at any time. Keep that in mind for green card holders who want to sponsor their spouse or their children. That can change at any time. And because there are more applications than there are less applications than there are immigrant visa numbers, the process is continuing, meaning it's current. Once the petition is approved, which takes about a year, they start to immediately prepare it and schedule it for an interview. So if you're the spouse of a green card holder right now, or the child under 21 and unmarried of a green card holder, evaluate your options. I can't stress this enough because this might be the right time for you to apply through your green card holder relative. How long after having a green card can I apply for citizenship? Generally speaking, it's going to be 5 years. If you've received it if you received your green card and you've served in the military for a year, then you're looking at 1 year. If you received it through a relative other than a U.S. citizen spouse, you're looking at 5 years. If you are married to a U.S. citizen, you could get it in as little as 3 years. So it's different based on what your circumstances are. But generally, the most common one is you have to wait for 5 years. Great questions so far, and these are, how much is it to become a U.S. citizen? So right now it's $725. You have to pay the application fee and then the biometrics fee. So it's $725 to apply for U.S. citizenship. What's the easiest way to get a work permit? So with the work permit, what I want to stress here is that usually, first of all, you have to be in the United States. The most common question I get is, I'm here on a visitor's visa, how can I get a work permit? That is not permissible. So you will not be able to get a work permit with a visitor's visa. That is not permitted. However, if you're applying, where you get a work permit is if you're applying for an immigration benefit in the United States, such as asylum, or if you're applying for a T visa, U visa, if you're applying for adjustment of status, meaning you're applying for the permanent residence while you're in the United States, then those are the types of applications that allow you to get a work permit while you've obtained the visa. So the T visa, for example, the U visa allows you to get a work permit while you're applying, and then the adjustment of status application, that's where you're applying through an employer or through a relative, that allows you to get the work permit while you are applying in the United States. So it gives you the work permit is there to relieve some of the stress during the application process, or to provide some sort of relief so you're able to work. So you live in Jamaica, and so if you live in Jamaica, you would be looking more at a visa, an employment-based visa, and those would be more on the temporary side. However, to do that, you're likely going to have to find an employer who is going to be willing to apply for you. What are the options to becoming resident if you have no legal family without a green card? You know, these questions are great. And you know why? Because you are helping to guide me through the topics that I wanted to talk about. And that touches on one that a lot of people don't know about, and it's the lottery for the green card. So if you go to the Department of State's website, you could Google it, Department of State. When you Google that, you go to the website and you type into the search bar, diversity lottery. You will see their information that they have about it. And it's basically every year around October, they open up registration. You register for this. And if your number is created, and this goes for you, Crystal, it goes for you as well, because this is a way for you to get, maybe a way for you to get permanent residence, even though you have no relatives or employers. You can apply. It's like the lottery for the green card. If your number is selected, you over the next year, you could possibly have the chance to go to an interview at the embassy And if you, all being well, you qualify, you get to come to the US and become a permanent resident. You and your family. It won't just be you alone. Your spouse and your children under 21 and unmarried can come along with you as well. What are the options to becoming resident if you have no... So I answered that already. Thanks for that question. I have a quick question. It won't be on topic, but it's about reparations for Jamaica. So yes, I don't have information about that regarding any kind of reparations. The lottery. So hot stepper outside of the US. So the lottery isn't open to Jamaican citizens. So this is not just for Jamaicans, but this is information for everybody. So if it's available to you, then this is going to be an option, when you have relatives or not. So if you have U visa status, can you get advanced parole to travel to your country? Is it advisable? So you can definitely, now with the U visa, you would have the option to travel outside of the United States, and that is exactly what the travel document is there to do. It is there to allow you to travel and still be able to come back. Now, as for if it is advisable, it really depends on what your circumstances are. I definitely would not want to advise you, tell you specifically that you can go and not know what's going on in your background. But if you are going to leave, it is definitely advisable. If you feel like you have to leave, it is definitely advisable that you have that travel document. How long after you get a 10-year green card, you can file for your child and spouse right away. So as long as you are now a permanent resident, you can apply right away. So what are the steps to become a U.S. citizen? Great question. So first you have to be a green card holder for a specific amount of time. And you have to, though that is generally 5 years. You have to, 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. If you're in the military, 1 year. You have to show good moral character. Usually that means your record is clean, that you've never done anything that reflects badly on your good moral character. You also have to show continuous presence in the United States and continuous physical presence, as well as continuous residence in the United States. That means that when you had your permanent residence, you didn't leave for more than 6 months in a year, and definitely not more than 1 year. So if I have a green card for more than 5 years, how long will it take to apply for U.S. citizenship? So you can start applying. Right now, my cases are taking an average of 6 months. However, keep in mind, my cases is not necessarily an indication that this will happen in your case, but the average can range from 6 months to 12 months. Can you say the name of the site? So it is to become a U.S. citizen. So this is not, if you're talking about the diversity visa, it is not for citizenship. It's for permanent residents. And it is the Department of State. So you can go there, read the instructions, and see if you could qualify for the diversity lottery. It's like the lottery for the green card. So Winston Williams, thanks for sharing the live. I really appreciate it. Now keep those questions coming. I have less than 5 minutes left on this live, but the conversation does not have to end here. Exactly. No, Department of State. So Department of State. So I travel 4 times. So Tia 2988. I travel 4 times to New York with a visa. And you can continue that question. So I have a little bit of time left. But what I want to also let you know, and the last time I traveled, they didn't stamp my... So if they didn't put the stamp, Tia, if they didn't put the stamp in your passport, there is an electronic version of the I-94. So if you go to the cpb.gov, so the Border Patrol site, so Customs and Border Patrol, go to their website and you can look up your most recent I-94. That will be evidence that you entered the country legally, and also it will show the permitted time, your permitted time, the amount of time that you're supposed to stay for. So if they didn't stamp it, it's going to be on that I-94. So look up that I-94 electronically. Great questions so far. Now I want to let you know that I'm going over to Instagram. So the conversation, the questions don't have to end here. It's just that I have a pre-scheduled live on Instagram next at 9:30. Can a mother that is a green card holder get her 40-year-old daughter straight to live in the US? If the 40-year-old is unmarried, then that is a possibility. However, it's taking about 5 to 6 years. So you just have to make sure that your 40-year-old is ready to wait, and they cannot get married, because as long as you stay a green card holder and she gets married, that's going to disqualify your daughter from becoming a permanent resident. So, so far, these have all been great questions. Thank you for helping to guide the conversation. I covered so many topics based on your questions. Now I'm going to head over to Instagram, and I want to tell you how to get there to continue this conversation. So can you travel when your conditional permit expired? Now, when your conditional permit expires, I definitely would not advise you to travel until you get the extension. So when you reapply for the extension, you get a letter, the receipt notice, and the receipt notice will give you an 18-month extension. And as long as you travel with the expired, so that you have the expired conditional permanent residence, but you have the receipt notice to show that you're reapplying and that they've granted you an extension, you can travel with that. Now, I don't know what your circumstances is, Javi Star, but if you haven't reapplied for your permanent residence, it's important that you know how, and if you can't do it with your spouse, there are ways to do it without your spouse. So, and it can be simpler than getting to immigration court or losing your status completely. She told him to come back 2 years after for me to leave me here with my son. Asha Mohammed, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is. I don't see a complete question. I don't know if that's related to permanent residence. But you can rephrase that question. What you can do though is I am here every night at 9 p.m. So if you can't hop on over to Instagram with me tonight, you can go over to Instagram right now. So Asha, I don't understand your question. To leave me here with my son. She told me he can come back 2 years after for me. I'm not sure. So Asha, I'm not sure what the question is. Can you please rephrase? So they're doing this for their benefit. So Asha, could you hop on over to Instagram, because I'm scheduled over there at 9:30. You can continue to ask questions there. And if you know that you cannot join me on Instagram right now, you can always join me tomorrow to continue the conversation and ask your questions. Also, if you know that you need to schedule a consultation already, that you need personal legal advice, because everything that I've said here is general information, then good night, Sexy Annie. Nakisha, not usually. So can the 40-year-old daughter stay in the US while waiting? Not usually, but it depends. And that's where a consultation is very important. You can schedule the consultation by calling 561-405-4889, or go to the link in my bio, go to the website. You'll see a contact form that you can complete, and then a scheduling coordinator will get back to you. Sexy Annie, thanks so much. I will see you all on Instagram, but if I can't see you on Instagram, then please join me tomorrow or the night after at 9 p.m. so we can talk more about your options to get residence and permission to work in the United States. Thanks so much for all your great questions and comments, and I'm looking forward to talking with you tomorrow night.